The debate between capitalism and socialism has raged for centuries. From revolutions that reshaped the globe to the rise and fall of entire empires, these two economic systems have promised vastly different futures. Capitalism, the idea that individuals should be free to pursue their own interests in an open market, has been praised for creating wealth and spurring innovation. Socialism, the belief in collective ownership and equal distribution of resources, has been heralded as a path to fairness and equality. Yet, neither system has lived up to its promises. Both have, at various times, failed on a massive scale, and it's essential to ask why. What's often missed in this battle is the unseen force behind both ideologies: human behavior. The truth is, economic systems don't operate in a vacuum. They are shaped by the people who run them, the incentives they create, and the trust they rely on. Over time, both capitalism and socialism have been warped and twisted by these forces, leading to unexpected consequences. It's not about which system is inherently better, but about how each system fails to account for the complexity of human nature. In this exploration, we'll examine both ideologies, how they emerged, how they've been tested, and why they've failed to meet the high expectations placed upon them. For over a century, the clash between capitalism and socialism has been the battleground upon which global powers have fought for control, dominance, and ideological supremacy. The promises of both systems, capitalism's individual freedom and prosperity, socialism's equality and fairness, have drawn millions to their causes, but neither has lived up to its lofty ideals. Instead, both systems have been tried, tested, and ultimately warped by the realities of human behavior. In theory, capitalism's greatest strength is its ability to create wealth and opportunity by allowing individuals to pursue their self-interest. But in practice, capitalism often leads to inequality, instability, and exploitation. Socialism, on the other hand, promises equality by redistributing wealth and resources. But in practice, it tends to stifle innovation, concentrate power, and create inefficiencies. What both systems have in common, however, is that neither of them has solved the most fundamental issue of human society: how to balance individual ambition with collective good. The debate between capitalism and socialism is not just about competing economic theories. It's about the invisible forces of power, greed, and fear that shape every system and every society. The roots of capitalism and socialism can be traced back to the Industrial Revolution in the late 18th century. The rise of factories, mechanized labor, and mass production led to unprecedented wealth creation. But it also created immense social and economic inequality. While factory owners and investors amassed fortunes, the working class faced long hours, low wages, and dangerous working conditions. Cities became overcrowded, polluted, and disease-ridden. The rise of industry had created a new form of inequality, one that was rooted not in land ownership, but in the control of capital. It was against this backdrop that the ideas of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels gained traction. They saw the new industrial economy as inherently exploitative, with the bourgeoisie, the owners of capital, profiting at the expense of the proletariat, the workers. Marx argued that the capitalist system was fundamentally flawed because it concentrated power and wealth in the hands of a few, while leaving the majority in poverty. For Marx, the only solution was to overthrow capitalism and establish a system of collective ownership in which the workers would control the means of production. In Marx's vision, socialism would replace capitalism. But Marx didn't just want a redistribution of wealth. He wanted a complete overhaul of society. He envisioned a world in which the state would wither away, leaving behind a classless, stateless society in which everyone contributed according to their abilities and received according to their needs. At the time, Marx's ideas seemed radical. But the inequality and misery caused by industrial capitalism gave them a sense of urgency. The rise of socialism was not born out of abstract theory. It was born out of the suffering of the working class, which had seen its hopes for prosperity dashed by the ruthless demands of the capitalist system. The first large-scale attempt to implement Marx's vision came in 1917, with the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. The Russian people, exhausted by centuries of monarchy, war, and economic collapse, embraced the promise of socialism. Lenin and his followers believed that they could create a new society, one free from the exploitation of capitalism. They envisioned a system where the state controlled all aspects of the economy, from land and factories to banks and transportation. The goal was to eliminate private property, redistribute wealth, and create a society based on equality. But in practice, things went horribly wrong. The Soviet economy, built on central planning and state ownership, was inefficient and incapable of meeting the needs of its people. The lack of market signals made it impossible to know what people wanted or needed. Without competition, there was little incentive for innovation or improvement. Factories produced shoddy goods to meet state quotas, while people waited in long lines for basic necessities. The economy stagnated, and the dream of equality turned into a nightmare of scarcity. The Soviet system's failure was rooted in the fact that human nature doesn't respond well to central control. People are motivated by personal incentives, by the desire to improve their own lives, by the promise of rewards for hard work. Without those incentives, productivity dropped, and the system became bogged down in bureaucracy and inefficiency. The promise of a classless society led to the rise of a new elite, the Communist Party, while ordinary citizens were left to endure shortages and deprivation. Despite these failures, socialism continued to hold a certain appeal. The Great Depression, which devastated the capitalist economies of the West, proved that capitalism had its own flaws. The United States, for example, suffered through a decade of unemployment, bank failures, and social unrest. While the Soviet Union struggled to provide for its people, it managed to maintain a degree of stability and order. For many, this was enough to keep faith in the idea of socialism, even if the reality didn't match the ideal. The Cold War, which began after World War II, was the ultimate test of the two systems. On one side, you had the Soviet Union, which adhered to the principles of socialism, centralized control, state ownership, and economic planning. On the other side, you had the United States, which embraced capitalism, with its focus on free markets, private enterprise, and individual freedoms. Both sides believed they had the superior system, and both sought to prove their superiority through economic growth, military power, and political influence. The Soviet Union's centralized planning allowed it to achieve rapid industrialization in the early years, especially during the 1930s and 1940s. The country's focus on heavy industry allowed it to build a powerful military and emerge as a superpower. However, by the 1970s, the Soviet economy had begun to show signs of stagnation. Without competition or market forces, the economy was plagued by inefficiencies. Factories churned out goods that no one wanted. Consumer products were of poor quality. Technological innovations stalled. The Soviet Union, despite its military power, was falling behind in the race for economic and technological supremacy. Meanwhile, the United States adapted. After the Great Depression, the U.S. government had implemented a series of reforms, Social Security, unemployment benefits, and labor rights, to address the systemic failures of capitalism. These reforms provided a safety net for workers, ensured a degree of economic stability, and made capitalism more tolerable for ordinary citizens. Over time, capitalism in the U.S. became more regulated, with safety nets and anti-monopoly laws designed to curb the excesses of free markets. While the Soviet Union was rigid and unable to adapt, capitalism proved itself to be more resilient. The United States was able to innovate and grow, adapting to new challenges as they arose. By the 1980s, the economic gap between the two systems was undeniable. Western living standards had surged, while the Soviet economy was in decline. The Cold War wasn't won by ideology. It was won by performance. By the time the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, the Soviet Union had collapsed. The Cold War had ended, and with it, the ideological battle between capitalism and socialism seemed to be over. Capitalism had won, and the world turned its eyes toward the future. But even as the Soviet Union disintegrated, the contradictions of capitalism became more apparent. The global economy entered a new phase, one dominated by finance, globalization, and technological innovation. Corporations became transnational entities with immense power. Wealth became concentrated in the hands of a few. The 2008 financial crisis served as a stark reminder that capitalism's instability had never truly disappeared. It had just taken on new forms. Today, the debate between capitalism and socialism is no longer about pure forms of either system. Instead, we live in a world of hybrid economies, systems that combine elements of both capitalism and socialism. Take Scandinavia, for example. Often mislabeled as socialist, Scandinavian countries embrace free markets and private enterprise. But they also have strong social protections, high taxes, and powerful unions. These countries have found a balance between market creativity and social stability, creating economies that are both innovative and equitable. In China, the government has embraced a form of state-directed capitalism. The Communist Party controls key sectors of the economy, while private companies drive growth and innovation. China's economic rise has been nothing short of remarkable. But it too faces challenges, particularly as it struggles with inequality, debt, and an aging population. The United States, for all its capitalist glory, also relies on government intervention to manage its economy. Regulation, welfare programs, and public services all play a role in ensuring the stability of the system. Yet, even as the U.S. embraces capitalism, it still faces deep economic inequalities and structural issues that threaten its long-term prosperity. The truth is that no system, capitalism or socialism, works perfectly. Both have strengths and weaknesses. Both have failed to live up to their promises, not because the ideas were inherently flawed, but because human nature is far messier than any theory can account for. The key to success in the modern world isn't about choosing one system over the other. It's about finding the right balance between individual freedom and collective responsibility. The most successful economies today are those that have learned to adapt, to blend market creativity with public investment, to balance innovation with fairness, and to harness the forces of power without allowing them to consume society. We are at a crossroads. The challenges of the 21st century, climate change, AI disruption, economic inequality, will require new solutions. The systems we build will need to be flexible, adaptable, and resilient. And if history teaches us anything, it's this: the system that survives is the one that can change. The real question isn't which system is better. It's which system can learn from its mistakes, evolve, and meet the needs of the people it's meant to serve. The future of our global economy will be shaped not by ideology, but by the ability to adapt, to adjust, and to create systems that work for everyone. If we want a better future, it's time to stop arguing about capitalism versus socialism and start thinking about how we can build something new, a system that works for the many, not just the few. The time to act is now.